Hello there, I'm Woolly Wormhead and welcome to my channel. In today's tutorial, I'd like to talk to you about one of my favourite subjects. I have a few favourite subjects that I like to talk about a lot. This particular favourite subject is grafting. I love grafting. All right, now grafting is not scary. All you're doing is mimicking one row of knitting, and I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to start by grafting stocking stitch today. I do have tutorials already for grafting garter stitch. We're going to look at stocking stitch today because this is the one that's easiest, there's less prep, and it's where most of us start when we come to learn grafting. All right. Now, before I get stuck into it and get my swatches out, I want to just kind of explain why we say grafting for stocking stitch and why we do not use the term Kitchener anymore. Now, Lord Kitchener, who the technique is named after, he didn't invent it. He just claimed credit, or not maybe didn't claim credit, he just got given credit. All right. Somebody somewhere else invented the technique. And secondly, he was not a nice guy. You know, he was involved in the Boer War, concentration camps, and it's kind of like he needs to get in the bin, and the term needs to go with him, really. So we are trying as a community, in this community, to stop using the term Kitchener and instead say grafting for stocking stitch. Same as we would say grafting for garter stitch or grafting moss stitch or grafting ribbing, whatever stitch pattern we're grafting. Grafting for stocking stitch is exactly the same thing. Kitchener has usually just been associated with grafting for stocking stitch, and not everybody's even aware there's actually other stitches that can be grafted, or the grafting method can be adapted for other stitches. All right, so this is kind of like a step into your grafting journey. Okay, and we're going to start with stocking stitch. So I'm going to switch to the overhead. I've got swatches ready, and I'm going to show you how to get started and give you a few tips. Okay, so here I have my two swatches in grey, stocking stitch or stockinette in US, and I'm going to graft these together. Okay, now I'm holding my needles parallel with the wrong sides together. Okay, so the wrong sides are on the inside and the right sides are on the outside. I do it this way. This isn't the only way to do it. There are tutorials where the work is flat, okay, and there are some where the needles aren't even in here and the stitches are loose. And that's particularly useful if you're repairing any knitting, but they all achieve the same thing. Okay, I do it this way, but you might find one of the other ways easiest. All right, again, this is one of those work out which way works best for you. Okay, however, the grafting technique, the way the needle goes into the yarn and then comes out again, is exactly the same in both, and that's what creates the line of stocking stitch. Now, I have got my yarn. This is a brown contrast yarn that I'm going to be using so that you can see what the graft is actually doing. I've attached it to the back swatch because it's always easiest to start with the yarn coming in from the back needle onto the front needle. All right. We start on the front needle and then go onto the back needle, and we do it that all the way through. Now, I'm going to start with the selvages, and I'm going to start in particular with the opening selvage. Now, the opening selvage of grafting any stitch really is the maneuver that leaves the stitch on the needle. That's how we open the selvage. To close it, we do the maneuvers or the part of the mantra that takes the stitch off the needle. Okay. Now, if you're say grafting the toe of a sock or working in the round or even grafting a square top hat flat at the top, you don't need to do these opening and closing selvage steps. All right, you just go straight into the graft. These give a nice firm edge for selvage, but they might be too pointy for your needs on a sock or on a hat. Okay, so let's tuck that yarn in there. So with the stocking stitch mantra, it is knit off, purl on. So we want to do purl on the front needle. And on the back needle, it's purl off, knit on. So that's what we're going to do to get us started. Okay. And the rest of the mantra for stocking stitch is knit off, purl on. Okay. And then on the back needle, purl off, knit on. What we're doing on the front needle is opposite to what we're doing on the back needle, okay? So knit off, purl on, purl off, knit on. I almost switched into garter stitch grafting there. Knit off, purl on, purl off, knit on. Now we've done a few stitches. Let's tighten up our work. Now, when we are tightening up our work, do it slowly. Do half a stitch at a time. start close to the selvage or the closest to where you last tightened up. Do it half a stitch at a time. So that gives you some control over the tension as you are tightening it up. And I would not leave it any more than, say, 5 stitches. I would do it every few stitches. Okay. So let's have a look at it again. Knit off, purl on, purl off, knit on, knit off, purl on, purl off, knit on. Now I'm going to stop again and tighten that up. Okay, so we can see that that was the last stitch we tightened. We're just going to tighten up here, half a stitch at a time, taking our time to make sure that this becomes invisible within our fabric. Obviously, I'm doing it in a contrast yarn so you can see what's happening. There we are. Now, you can see that that is created one row of knitting because a graft mimics one full row of knitting, because when you are doing a row of knitting, you're doing loops on the underside as you drop the stitches off that you've just worked. And this is what it's doing. Now, it is also creating a kind of sort of 2 pattern rows because it's closing off 2 sets of live stitches. So the brown is forming a ridge here on this side and on here where we're closing off those sets of stitches, but it does mimic one full row of knitting. All right. It's not 2 rows. It might look like 2 pattern rows because each of these rows is getting finished, but it is actually one full row of knitting. Now, if you do ever need to stop, I recommend stopping on the back needle because it's easiest to remember where you need to get going again, because we do the front needle first and the back needle second. However, if you stop part way, look at where your yarn is. Okay, it's coming out of there up. So that looks like I just did a knitwise, which we know is the second step on the back needle. So that means we need to go to the front needle and do it that way. This time the yarn is going down in, so it's kind of like, okay, I've just done the purl on that one. So we need to purl off and knit on. All right, that's really helpful for showing us where we have just stopped, is looking at where we're doing with the yarn. Okay. I also want you to see how I'm just doing it in one step. It saves time to do it that way with the needle. You don't need to pull the yarn through after each step. Just go knit off, purl on, pull the yarn through, purl off, knit on, and pull the yarn through. Okay. So I'm now going to tighten this up and then graft to the end, and I'm going to show you how to do the closing selvage. Okay, we're almost at the end of the graft, and I've just got to work these 2 stitches here, and then we'll be closing off this selvage. Now, as it gets to this point, because you've only got a couple of stitches left, it's really easy for your needles to slip out, especially if you're using something like a metal needle or a carbons like I am. Okay, so you want to make sure you keep hold of them nice and firmly so you don't drop your stitches. So I'm going to knit off, purl on there, purl off, knit on there. Okay, yeah, so it's especially tricky even if you've got like a yarn tail or something down there. The stitch might want to stretch out, so just be careful with it. So we do knit off there and purl off there, and at that point we are safe to take our needle out. So there's that loose stitch I had there that was causing me a little bit of a problem. Let's just tighten up those last couple of stitches. Okay. Then we pull that through there. And there we have finished our graft. One complete row of knitting, complete and done, and it's closed off 2 sets of live stitches on the back, and our fabric is now complete. There you go. That's grafting stocking stitch. I hope that's been helpful. All right. I know it can be scary kind of grafting for the first time because you've got 2 sets of live stitches and you don't want them to unravel, you don't want to drop any stitches, but as long as you're holding your needles firmly and you're holding them in a way that's comfortable for you, you're going to be fine. All right. It's not difficult. I know you're kind of sewing, but you are mimicking one full row of knitting and it will give you a really lovely finish. All right. Hope the tips have been particularly helpful as well, about not just about holding your needles, but about how to tighten up your fabric as you're going, tighten up that graft line to maintain a nice even tension, and working out where you are in the graft by looking at how your yarn had just gone through a particular stitch. That's really handy to be able to know where you stop and start. All right. Okay. If this has been helpful and you like my tutorials, I would much appreciate it if you do the like, hype, share thing and help me grow my channel and get my tips out to more knitters. All right. And until next time, happy grafting.